Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Oh, hey guys, welcome back. Or is it I'm back? It's a new year. Well, kind of. At least it's still young anyways. And I am trying to jump back into this thing with hopefully doing a lot more than just trip videos. Speaking of trip videos, at least I did get my Wind River trip finally all uploaded. So those of you who have not had a chance to go through and watch all those, well, you're missing out. Wind River Mountains, man, what an awesome mountain range. It was an amazing trip, but not gonna lie, it kicked my butt too. The toughest trip I have ever done in my life. Just was not as ready for it as I had thought I was. And so that's what I want to do with this video, is actually share 6 different things that I learned and experienced that I would do differently on any other high route kind of hike that I would do in the future, and really any long multi-day long distance kind of backpacking trip. But as I said, that route in the Wind Rivers that my friend Blake and I hiked kicked our butts. And so that is the number one thing that I experienced. So I was just simply not physically prepared. Went into it a little too confident in my abilities. Apparently I'm not as young as I thought I was. I actually turned 40 this year. It's kind of scary actually. Not getting any younger, that's for sure. And yeah, I just don't have the youth that I once did. So I think that came into play a little bit. But really, I just hadn't been as active as I could have been or should have been going into that trip. So that is definitely something I would do differently, and I would encourage anyone else looking at any high routes to hike, take the training seriously. You would not want to run a marathon and have very little running or very little miles of training going into that. You'd want to pretty rigorously train your body to prepare for that kind of marathon. Well, hiking a high route isn't much different. It is brutal, type 2 fun for lots of sections through those things. And if your body's not ready for it, it's going to be so much worse. Your body's going to get a ton of pain. I mean, to be honest, I've ran a couple marathons and did train pretty adequately for those. It still put my body in a lot of pain, so I don't know. But seriously, make sure you, and something I will make sure I do for hiking any future high routes, and I do plan to tackle a high route that I've strung together for the Uintas. I've not seen anyone else do the exact route that I have lined out, so if all goes to plan, that's going to be my big one for this summer, if I can make that work out. So I will definitely get myself more prepared physically for that one. All right, number 2 thing that I experienced on this trip that was not fun was my feet. They were quite uncomfortable virtually from first day on, and they only got worse from there. How can a guy like me, who's pretty darn experienced with backpacking, at least enough to know how important footwear, good footwear is? I'll tell you what I did wrong, at least I think what went wrong for me. Now, it's not the shoe that I chose to take on this hike that I went wrong with. I think it was the Footwear Feet insole. Yes, I thought, hey, if this works really well in the ultra lone peaks, I can get the best of both worlds and take this insole and pop it in the Solomon and experience twice the benefits there. Well, I think that ended up being my mistake. I think this was overkill. On top of the rigidity that's already built into that outsole and that firmer material there, I don't think I needed all the extra support and rigidity of this outsole. And so the result was, at the end of each day, even from the first day on, my feet felt like they had been walking barefoot on a hard surface all day long. And that just wasn't comfortable. So the lesson learned here, and the thing that I would do differently in the future if I ever wear these shoes again on such a route, is I would actually seriously consider just going back to the original insole that came with these Ortholite little insoles that Solomon throws in there. And then if not these, then probably look at some other brands, maybe something a little bit more cushier, something without the rigidity of this plate that goes from the heel up to the arch. Maybe I'd look at something as expensive as they are. There's a brand called Curex that's supposed to be really good, or even down to something budget friendly like Dr. Scholl's. Something for me to keep experimenting with on shorter hikes and weekend hikes, and go from there. All right, number 3 thing that I did not enjoy on this trip happens to still be in the same realm as footwear and feet, and that is hot spots and blisters. Yeah, not fun stuff. Normally I don't have issues with blisters, and I think a reason for that being is because, again, I try to be proactive and do what I can to prevent blisters from forming. First of all, it starts with the footwear. Again, I've had good experience with the Solomon X Ultras, the prior pair that I've had before I started trying the Ultra Lone Peaks out, and then of course the Ultra Lone Peaks. Those have all been pretty good for me, and the socks that I generally wear are these Darn Toughs, just a hiker model, and those usually been good to me as well. I'm not immune from hot spots when I do get the occasional hot spot, as I am prone to get from time to time, is I always have a few slabs of Leuco tape with me that I can use, or sometimes if it's not too bad, I'll just start with like KT tape. They make these slim little pre-cut strips of their tape, and those work pretty well. Those are specifically cut for blisters and hot spots. And so yeah, between these 2 things, that usually gets the job done, and I'm good to go the rest of the trip, and don't have any irritation anymore, and don't have any blisters. That was not the case with this trip. I mentioned there's a lot of rocks to go through on this route, and especially by day 5, we had almost the whole day was on rocks, climbing through rocks and walking on rocks, just rocks, rocks, rocks of every size. And so when you're doing that, your feet, especially the talus fields, your feet are going in every angle because those rocks are cut in every angle. It is just tug and pull on your foot in every direction, sliding around in that foot. Now, it's not sliding very much, but there's still just enough friction, just in those micro movements in that shoe from all those angles will put a lot of friction back and forth on your feet there. And when you combine that, unfortunately, with part wool socks, 50% merino wool here, which hold on to moisture a little longer than full synthetic socks will, and then the heat, oh my gosh, it was so hot those first several days of the route that we were on. So I think over the course of the trip, from having sweaty feet from day 1, just the heat of the day just really made my feet hot, and we did, take our shoes off at breaks, try to let the feet air out. If we're at a little lake or creek, try to dip my feet in, take the socks off, and let my socks air out as well off the feet while my feet soaked in the water, and try and cool them off that way. And that went pretty well for the first few days. Kept the hot spots at bay. of the ones that were there and were successfully taped over with the Leuco tape. But by that 5th day, where we got into all those rocks, it didn't go so well. I ended up with a blister in a spot I never would have imagined I could get a blister at. And I'll just use my hands for reference because I do not have any B-roll to show you. And even if I did, I would spare you guys the grossness of that. But just using my hand as a reference here, this is about the spot that I encountered, developed a blister under my foot. And that was right between the 2 middle toes, right up in the crease here. And yeah, made it very difficult to protect. I thought I had it all covered in a patch of Leuco tape, and still blistered underneath the edge of that, and eventually popped and cracked. Became quite painful, and I tried to bandage it and put a little blister bandage there, but with the pressure between the crease and the 2 toes against the edges, it just kept popping off or sliding off no matter what I would try to do to protect it. And ended up trying to do a little classic moleskin donut around it to take that pressure off of it, and that only just put more uncomfortable pressure on the outer edges around it. And yeah, it was just really not a good spot for a blister. So after experiencing that, I think something I would do differently for a future trip, and that is to try some either Body Glide, or I've also got this Band-Aid anti-friction stick. Probably pretty much the same kind of stuff. And yeah, they're just meant to kind of help repel moisture and prevent friction, or protect your skin feet from friction and chafing. So maybe that would be effective. And something else that I probably strongly consider for such a trip like that is actually changing out my socks. Instead of doing the darn tough merino wool type socks or anything with merino wool, is maybe go full synthetic. Even cooler is I found there's some brands of socks out there. Specifically, one brand is called Right Sock, and they make fully synthetic dual layer socks. They also have dual layer merino wool socks. So maybe merino wool would be good because they do kind of hold down on the odor a little bit. The odor's not quite as strong with merino wool, but I might argue with that. At the end of a hot, sweaty day, your feet are just going to stink, period. Mine do, for sure. Also, what I might really consider is getting these Injinji socks. The Injinji brand, that's known for their socks that go individually over each of your toes, or like other people just call them, their toe socks. Yeah, they make regular toe socks, as regular as toe socks could be, but they also make thinner liner style socks that are made to be liners, and then paired with another sock goes over it. That's something I might look into. So those things yeah, I need to try one of those other options when I do a long, aggressive, strenuous hike for days on out, beyond just a simple weekend. Because yeah, my feet definitely took a beating on that trip, and I paid the price. All right, moving on to number 4 thing that did not go well for me on this trip. And that is simply just some of the snacks that I took, particularly some energy nutrition bars, and more specifically, these Kirkland signature protein bars that I picked up at Costco. They got these chocolate chip cookie dough flavors, and they also had fudge brownies in the box that it came with. And I took one of each for each day. So that's right, 2 of these each day. Why? Well, because first of all, they're packed with 190 calories, and as one single bar, they're not too heavy, but still very dense. And so it's a pretty good amount of calories for the ounce to ounce weight that they have. And then they also have 21 grams of protein. So I thought, man, if I know my body's going to be taking a beating as it was uh, going through all the strenuous terrain and all these mountain passes zigzagging over the Continental Divide, it wouldn't hurt to have extra protein as well. So I tried a couple of these, both flavors, beforehand, and thought they weren't too bad. The taste was okay, and I thought, well, if they weren't too bad then, they shouldn't be too bad out on the trail. Well, I was wrong. It's not the taste that's bad, it's the texture that became a problem for me. These things are so tough to chew. They're like standard, a traditional energy bar. You have to drink with every bite to try and swallow it, and that's not easy to do, especially when you're sitting at the bottom of a pass. You know you need to fuel up and re-energize to get yourself up over that pass and try not to bonk. And not only is it hot, your heart's pounding, you're trying to relax from that, you've got nervous anticipation of what that pass is going to be like, how hard is it going to be, what's it going to be like getting over the other side. It does a number on your appetite. I was just not that hungry despite burning up all these calories. Different story in camp, much more relaxed in camp. Had no problem with my actual meals, breakfasts or dinners in camp food. That was easy. No problem eating that. But these bars, especially on trail, even while taking breaks, just hard. So I ended up not eating all of these as I would have liked. About halfway through the trip, I had to give up on them. Not only that, but even in camp, despite being able to eat my dinner just fine, these were not very appealing for dessert afterwards. And the whole reason for taking them as dessert was, again, for the protein, let my muscles kind of heal and repair themselves with all that extra protein. Point being is, I won't be taking so much of those again in the future. Instead, I'm going to change up my strategy a little bit with these kind of aggressive hikes, and that's where I'm going to focus less on protein and more on just calories for when I'm exerting myself and being active. So for the calories, I think I'm going to start trying these energy gels that or energy chews. Somebody recommended these to me, so I've not tried them yet, but I will start using them on day hikes and shorter backpacking trips and see how they go. But yeah, there's a few brands out there. Here's Pro Bar, so I picked these up to try. There's also Cliff, makes Cliff blocks. And then there's Honey Stingers. They also have some energy chews. And then I know Gatorade makes some too. So I'm going to try those. They've got to be much easier to chew and much easier to swallow, particularly on the swallowing part. I assume that they will not be so dry and tough to chew and requiring lots of liquid while I'm chewing to make it something that's easy enough to swallow. So I'm really keen to try those out, see how they do for energy. They are pretty well packed with calories, from 160 to 190, 200 calories a package. Start off with 1 or 2 at the base of a big pass, and then just pop a couple more in as I'm going up the pass, and just chew and eat as I go, or even suck on them for a little bit. So that's my plan there, and then the strategy is to move on to something like a Built bar for a post-dinner dessert. These two have a lot of protein packed into them, and in my experience they are not only fairly good on the taste, but much, much easier to chew. They go down just like a normal candy bar, just like a caramel, chocolate covered caramel candy bar. That's what I feel like I'm getting when I eat a Belt bar. And that's going to be so much easier to eat as a dessert and to pack on the protein for muscle recovery at the end of a long, hard day. And so yeah, calories while on the run or on the move, and protein in the evening with dinner and after dinner for muscle recovery and preparation for the next day. All right, item number 5, my tent. Yes, my tent. My beloved tarp tent notch. It was awesome. I love it. I've always loved it until the final day of this trip. I finally experienced the unfortunate, not sag, it was that it soaked up a bunch of moisture and became a heavy tent to pack out on my final day out. And that was not fun because we just talked about all those protein bars from Costco that I did not eat. And so my vision of packing out a ultra light pack at the end of this trip on our last day out to the trailhead, 10 miles to go from our campsite, mostly downhill, all fairly flat level. It was supposed to be so glorious with a lightweight pack with very little food left. That did not happen. I packed out extra food weight, more than I had anticipated and would have wanted to, and packed out a very wet, soggy tent. So, the tarp tent notch, rocking the Sil nylon version. That's really the only version I can afford. Here's what happened. Yeah, it rained the 5th night going into day 6. That was not an issue. That rain, there were still beads of water on the tent when I woke up in the morning. Just shook the tent, pounded it from the inside, and all that rain bounced right off, and I didn't really have much of any condensation on the inside. So it was a fairly dry tent going into my pack that morning. Not a problem, right? It can handle the rain. Day 6, about early afternoon, that's where things went south for us. We finally got hit with our very first and only thunderstorm of the trip. That alone was pretty amazing, given what you usually get in mountains like the Wind River Mountains for that time of year, late July. It wasn't very long, but man, did it throw down a bunch of rain, bunch of hail, and a bunch more rain. Almost flash flooded the trail that we were on, going over a little bit of a pass called Cube Rock Pass. That trail went from no water to like 4 inches of water within like minutes, just like less than 5 minutes. No exaggeration there. It was like 4 inches of water flooding down the trail within 5 minutes as we were going up over. And then we hit the rocks and anyways, so my pack cover was the ULA circuit, and everything touching the surface of the pack inside took on some moisture, and that included my tent. I just had my tent stuffed inside my pack there, had it out near the top so it was easy to pull out when I got to camp and set that up, and that's just kind of how I do things with that. So it had already started absorbing a little moisture from that thunderstorm. However, it stopped raining not too long after it started, but we never saw sunshine again. The rest of the day, the rest of the miles we hiked, it was cloudy, it was misty, and that continued to linger on all through the evening. We ended up camping down a place called Beaver Park, very large meadow in a low-lying valley right alongside the Green River, and everything there was soaked and saturated already when we came in, and through the evening it just got colder and cooler, and yeah, there was no way that we were going to escape condensation this night. Any tent would have condensated in these conditions. And so sure enough, set the tent up and went to bed. All through the night, the clouds lingered low and continued to just mist and fog the whole area. And so when I woke up, the tent was completely drenched in condensation on both sides, actually. Just the moisture of the ambient humidity on the outside, and then of course condensation on the inside. When it was time to pack up, yeah, the clouds were starting to part and we were starting to see a lot of good blue sky as we were packing up, but we were so far down into this pretty tight canyon valley that the sun, it was going to take quite some time for the sun to come up and actually significantly do anything to dry my tent. So unfortunately, I had to pack it wet. Now I could have just packed it on the outside, but we had several miles of mostly tree-covered hiking to do to get back to the trailhead. It wasn't until the final couple miles that there was any significant stretches where we were exposed to the sun when it finally came up high enough. And by then it wasn't worth pulling over and pulling the tent out and spreading it out to dry. At that point we just went straight to the car at the trailhead, and I pulled it out there and spread it out in the back, and it dried on the way home. And I hung it up when I got home, and what little moisture was left in it by then dried out overnight hanging up here at home. Why did I take a sil nylon notch when a lot of you know that I have a Dan Durston designed X-Mid? Well, I've got a few reasons why I gave a preference to the notch over the X-Mid for this trip, and I will share those reasons more in a future video coming up soon here. So what I would do differently next time is I probably would give it more thought of taking the X-Mid out here for a trip like that in the future. Why? Because it's sil polyester, and of course sil polyester is hydrophobic. It not only sheds water well in a rainstorm, but it's much more resistant to absorbing water in high humidity and cold conditions, unlike the sil nylon. With such high humidity and condensation, there was no escaping the hydrophilic property of it, which enables it to actually absorb moisture into it, and it gain almost twice its weight, which really is not fun to pack out. So we are on to number 6, the final thing that I didn't enjoy so well, and this one's, I'm going to say, a lot more minor than the other first 5 there, but I kind of already mentioned it in item number 5 there, and that's my pack. Yeah, I took my ULA circuit. I love that pack, but again, it got soaked in that thunderstorm, unlike any other storm I've ever experienced with that. And while it is pretty water resistant and shed light rain for a little while, again, this one, just we got sucked in the clouds sucked in on us and just crowded in the humidity all around us, along with the rain and the hail. It just was more than my pack could resist, and it took in a lot of water weight and moisture there. And again, did not have a chance to dry out in the sun going into camp, and it was not dry leaving camp. So not only was my tent carrying water weight that it had absorbed, my pack was too. Even my sack took on some water as well. And so, yeah, a lot of water weight heading out of camp that morning. And so I'll just speak on the pack. What would I do differently next time? I don't know. I'm seriously considering maybe taking a pack cover again, like I used to. Few extra ounces of weight, but I think those few extra ounces of weight are a lot less than what the pack weight was with all that extra moisture it absorbed. Again, it is Robic nylon, I've got the classic circuit, that's what they're made of. It's this nylon material. It's hydrophilic, so in enough humidity and right conditions, it will soak in moisture. Another option for me would be to consider trying out a X-Pack pack. I know they do make circuits in X-Pack, and then Waymark. All of their packs are X-Pack material, among other brands out there. And from what I know, those don't absorb as much water. They not only shed water better, but they're not as prone to soak up as much water rate in super humid conditions. So those are 6 things that you guys might want to really keep in mind and prepare for, and know what you're getting into when you're going out for extended trips of a week long or more. And especially if you're going to be tackling really rough off-trail terrain like we did with the high route. So that's going to do it, guys. Hope that video was helpful, and thanks for watching, and catch you on the next one.